The Bible is filled with incredible stories, some inspiring, some mysterious, and others downright shocking. But did you know that some events in biblical history are so intense, so terrifying, and so unthinkable that they leave even the most devout believers speechless? From divine punishments to supernatural interventions, these moments reveal the raw power of God, the depths of human sin, and the consequences of disobedience. In this video, we will take a deep dive into the most shocking moments in biblical history, exploring their details, the lessons they teach, and why they continue to leave people in awe. Some of these stories are violent, others are miraculous, but all of them are unforgettable. So, prepare yourself, because what you're about to hear will shake you to the core. Number 1. Great Flood. When the world was wiped out. Imagine waking up one morning to find that the entire world is drowning under a torrential flood, wiping out every living thing except for a single family and a few animals. That's exactly what happened in the time of Noah's Ark. According to Genesis 69, humanity had become so wicked that God regretted creating mankind. Genesis 6-6. Sin had spread like a disease. Violence, corrupt people ran. Evil had consumed the world. God decided there was only one solution: complete destruction. But there was one man who stood out: Noah, a righteous man who found favor with God. God commanded him to build an ark, a massive wooden vessel, to save his family and pairs of every animal. For 120 years, Noah built this ark, warning people of the coming judgment. They laughed. They mocked. They ignored the warnings. Then, the rain began to fall. At first, it might have seemed like just another storm, but then the waters kept rising. Rivers overflowed. The land disappeared. People ran to high ground, screaming for mercy, but it was too late. Every man, woman, and child outside the ark perished. The entire world was submerged under a global flood for 40 days and 40 nights. Only Noah and his family survived, emerging after the flood to start a new civilization. The shocking lesson: God is patient, but there comes a point where judgment is inevitable. Number 2. Destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Fire from heaven. One of the most terrifying and shocking events in biblical history is the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, two cities so wicked that God wiped them off the face of the earth in a single devastating act of divine judgment. These cities, located near the Dead Sea, had become infamous for their extreme violence, corruption, and immorality. According to Genesis 19, their people indulged in every imaginable sin: rampant injustice, cruelty to strangers, and perversion. So much so that their wickedness cried out to heaven for judgment. God, in his righteousness, could no longer ignore their deep-rooted sin. But before executing his judgment, God showed mercy. He sent 2 angels in disguise to the city to investigate. They arrived at the home of Lot, a righteous man who lived among the people. Lot welcomed the angels into his house, offering them hospitality and shelter. However, as night fell, a horrifying scene unfolded. Leading them surrounded Lot's house and demanded that he hand over the visitors so they could abuse them. Their behavior was so vile and aggressive that it became clear Sodom and Gomorrah were beyond saving. At that moment, God's judgment was sealed. The angels, seeing the depths of the city's depravity, struck the attackers with blindness, preventing them from carrying out their wicked plans. They then turned to Lot and commanded him to flee with his family immediately, warning that the cities would soon be destroyed by fire from heaven. Lot hesitated, perhaps reluctant to leave behind his home and everything he had built. But the angels grabbed his hand and that of his family, leading them out of the city before dawn, urging them to run without looking back. As soon as they were at a safe distance, the skies opened and a terrifying event unfolded. Fire and sulfur rained down from heaven, consuming everything. The once thriving cities were reduced to ashes and ruins, their inhabitants perishing in the flames. No one survived. Number 3. Plagues of Egypt. God versus Pharaoh. One of the most dramatic showdowns in history was between God and Pharaoh in the book of Exodus. The Israelites had been enslaved in Egypt for 400 years, suffering under brutal conditions. God sent Moses to demand their release, but Pharaoh refused. What followed was a series of 10 horrifying plagues, each more terrifying than the last. Water turned to blood. The Nile River, the lifeline of Egypt, became undrinkable blood. Plague of frogs. Millions of frogs swarmed the land, invading homes and beds. Plague of lice. Dust turned into lice, covering people and animals. Plague of flies. Swarms of flies filled the air, making life unbearable. Death of livestock. All Egyptian cattle and animals dropped dead overnight. Plague of boils. Painful sores covered the skin of Egyptians. Hailstorm of fire. Massive hail mixed with fire rained from the sky, destroying crops. Locust invasion. Swarms of locusts devoured whatever was left of the food supply. Darkness for 3 days. An eerie, supernatural darkness covered Egypt. Death of the firstborn. The most terrifying of all, the angel of death struck every Egyptian home, killing their firstborn child, including Pharaoh's son. This final plague was so devastating that Pharaoh finally let the Israelites go. The shocking lesson: God will fight for his people, and no earthly power can stand against him. Number 4. Crucifixion of Jesus. The most unjust death in history. Of all the shocking moments in the Bible, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ stands as the most tragic and profound. Jesus was sinless. He healed the sick, raised the dead, and preached love and forgiveness. Yet he was betrayed, falsely accused, and sentenced to die the most brutal death imaginable: crucifixion. Beaten beyond recognition, flogged with whips that tore his skin, and forced to carry his own cross, Jesus was nailed to it and left to die in agony. For 6 hours, he hung in excruciating pain, gasping for breath, as onlookers mocked him. At the moment of his death, the earth shook, darkness covered the land, and the temple veil was torn in two, signifying that mankind now had direct access to God. But the most shocking part may shock us. He rose from the dead, defeating sin and death forever. The lesson: Jesus' death wasn't the end, it was the ultimate victory. The Bible isn't just a book of stories. It's a record of real events that shaped the world. These shocking moments teach us about God's justice, his mercy, and his power. The Great Flood teaches us that wickedness has consequences. Sodom and Gomorrah remind us that sin leads to destruction. The plagues of Egypt show that no power is greater than God. The crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus reveal God's greatest act of love. These stories may shock us, but they also show us one thing: God is in control, and he has a plan for those who follow him. If you want to hear more about the Bible's most unbelievable stories, subscribe now. There are many more mysteries, miracles, and shocking events waiting to be uncovered. Stay blessed.